Good morning, everyone. We're going to call back into session yesterday's workshop session. As you recall, we had a few things left on the agenda. So with that, I think we were on an update on Safe Track with Metro. So Ms. Mitchell, I don't know if you want to kick this off.
Yeah, and this is again Tim Roseboom with DRPT, and he's going to talk a little bit about the Safe Track program to give you all an update of what's going on, but also we wanted to highlight for you all that in response to, and well, something we've been working with the local transit providers up there, and we have included some funding in the 6-year plan to provide some matching funds to the local transit systems that are providing service over and above what they're already doing to manage congestion for the Safe Track program. So,
okay.
With that.
Well, thank you, Director Mitchell, and good morning, Mr. Secretary and members of the board. Yeah, as Director Mitchell said, this is an update on the WMATA Safe Track program. I will say this is mainly just a descriptive update, so it doesn't really get into some of the capital funding issues that Steve Pitter talked about yesterday, or some of the policy or management issues that the governor talked about. But nonetheless, this is a big topic for Metro and for the Northern Virginia region. So this is an overview of the WMATA Safe Track program. I'll just read from the slide. Safe Track is a massive, comprehensive, holistic effort to address safety recommendations and rehabilitate the Metro rail system on an accelerated basis by expanding all available maintenance windows. And as the slide says, what that means is Metro is basically consolidating 3 years worth of work down into a single year. They're expanding evening work, they're expanding midday work, they're working during the rush hours, which they hadn't previously done. It does get them to a state of good repair that was recommended by the Federal Transit Administration and in the NTSB report. I'll get into some more detail later in the presentation, but it features full shutdowns of some segments. It features single tracking of other segments. Generally, they're less than a month, but in one case, it does go for more than a month. And then they're bringing in contractors to supplement their workforce and basically to consolidate the schedule. So just continuing with some of the details of the plan, weeknights they are beginning work early at 8 p.m. This gives them about 2 extra hours of work per night, and that's mainly due to setup and takedown requirements. They had a pretty narrow window of when they could work. Because of their evening service. They are conducting work during the midday and during the AM and PM rush hours, which they had not previously done, and they're expanding their weekend maintenance program by closing the system at midnight. That started earlier this month, June 3rd. At midnight was actually when the first Safe Track work started. So also for the next year, they put a moratorium on extended hours from time to time for special events, sporting events and concerts. They would get asked to run service past midnight, and they've said they won't do that for the next year. And then finally, just at the bottom of the slide, the definition of a safety surge is maximizing the efficiency of work that requires long duration outages. So this does let them take advantage of these shutdowns to increase the efficiency of their work. So this little green and white schedule is the overall program for the next year. If anyone's been at a Metro station in the last 2 weeks, you've seen this over and over. You've probably had someone try to hand this to you, a little pamphlet of it. You've seen a sandwich board of it, and then we'll get into some detail, surge by surge as I go on. But this is the overall schedule. Again, some features of the program. It is allowing them to accelerate work by having long duration track outages. It's mostly above ground work. There's some below ground work, but mostly above ground. It's the type of work that they couldn't achieve during their limited maintenance schedule that they've been under for the last several years. Continuing, they do recognize the rush hour impacts to the riders of the system. Because of that, they've dedicated a fleet of shuttle buses to basically provide bus bridges around stations, and then Metro is leading kind of a regional coordination effort between all 3 of the DOTs, the RPT, some of the regional entities. Is very, very well coordinated in terms of communication, street closures, things like that. So again, some of the more specific metro mitigation efforts, there is this dedicated fleet of metro buses to provide passengers with another way around the closures. They're running 8-car trains generally where they have reduced frequencies to provide additional capacity along an entire line where they might have a closure. They're actively encouraging people to telework, to take alternate modes. They've beefed up their customer support staff, both in their call center and at the actual stations themselves. There is, I mentioned, a major coordination effort with the local jurisdictions in Virginia. VDOT has been involved in that. It touches issues like traffic control, parking, the local bus operations. VDOT's been looking at the HOV and kind of managing the HOV system. And then Metro has a pretty detailed website that has, for each surge, detailed information about that surge will be put on the website, but they have information about the overall program. That's a resource, and that's really where they're directing people. They've been coordinating with OPM, who sets the policies for telework with the federal government, and they do have trains placed around the system and strategic personnel to respond quickly to issues. So as far as specifically what DRPT has been asked to do, this is an excerpt from Executive Directive 8. The governor issued it on May 25th of last month. I'll just read from the slide. Among other things, the Department of Rail and Public Transportation shall coordinate with the Washington Metropolitan Transit Authority and other providers of transit service in Northern Virginia to increase bus transit service available to riders to mitigate the impacts of the WMATA Safe Track program. So there are some other things in the directive that talks about the Metropolitan Safety Commission and some overall state of good repair issues, but this is kind of the reason why DRPT has a role in this. So continuing on with DRPT's mitigation efforts, we have been actively participating with a regional group that includes Metro, Northern NBTC, who was here yesterday. They're kind of coordinating the Northern Virginia effort, Virginia Department of Emergency Management, VDOT, State Police, the Airport Authority, the local transit systems, the Pentagon, police and fire. And then DRPT has done some specific work around helping the local transit providers who are planning for supplemental service. They've been developing costs that are directly associated with that service and have passed it on to us. And Mr. Pittard mentioned that there is about a $2 million line item in the SIP that would help offset those costs that are being borne by local transit systems for the supplemental service they're running for the Safe Track. As far as some of the specific city by city or county by county efforts in Northern Virginia, Arlington, who runs ART Transit, have looked at where the surges are, and they're basically just putting larger capacity buses on their system, on their routes to deal with kind of the overflow. But they're also very actively managing on-street parking in Arlington. They're very actively sort of planning for some of the first surge was at the Ballston Metro, which is one of the busiest metro stations in Arlington. So, they have a robust staffing effort around that. The Fairfax Connector, which provides service to the Vienna Metro, has added a direct route between Vienna and the Pentagon, and from Reston as well to the Pentagon to help people sort of bypass the Safe Track Zone. Dash, which is the local system in Alexandria, is planning to do supplemental shuttles for the work that affects their stations in Alexandria, Braddock Road, Pentagon City, and Crystal City. Loudoun County, who runs a commuter bus service from just outside where the Silver Line operates right now, is supplementing their commuter bus service. BRTC, which runs service from Prince William County to metro stations, they've basically adjusted their running times, and they're holding their buses at the end of they're like 15 minutes at the end of each trip in order to allow their passengers extra time to get to the end of the line. And then finally, VRE, who's not running extra service, but they have looked at their system, and they know that they have have some capacity, parking capacity, and they're directing people to the Burke station for this first surge, which is relatively close to the Vienna metro, so they can add, so people can go to Burke instead of Vienna and take VRE in. And then again, some of the specific Northern Virginia jurisdictions mitigation. All the jurisdictions are actively encouraging telework, alternative modes, flex schedules. Many of the systems, Arlington County, Fairfax County, PRTC have set up their own websites to assist their passengers. They're also supplementing the Metro customer service staff by, dispatching their employees to affected stations. VDOT has been very actively supporting Metro. They're placed in the command center at the Ballston Metro, and then as well as the group within VDOT that looks at just the traffic impacts, looks at the roadway system, has been very well coordinated with Metro. Commonwealth, DRPT, and VDOT have been encouraging carpool, van pooling as an alternative, and then also encouraging slugging, this sort of spontaneous carpooling that allows people to use cars to use the HOV that wouldn't normally be allowed in places where it doesn't currently exist right now. Capital Bike Share has also added service. I think Mr. Dyke mentioned that yesterday. So they've seen quite an uptick in usage since this Safe Track has gone into place. And then finally, well, not finally, but winding down, this is kind of the overall Safe Track program. It is 15 safety surges. 10 of the 15 do affect Virginia directly, are in Virginia. 7 of those 10 are single tracking, 3 of the 10 are full closures, and even those 5 that aren't directly in Virginia, the service along the entire line. So if you're working on the blue line in DC, for example, that runs from Springfield to Largo, there is a reduction in service along the entire line. The longest surge is surge number 9. It will be this fall. It's just over a month, 42 days, and it's single tracking between Vienna and West Falls, West Falls Church, which is a very busy segment, an end of line segment. So on the orange line. So just surge by surge. Surge number 1 is single tracking between East Falls and Ballston. It's underway. Surge number 2 is 7 days of a full shutdown between National Airport and Braddock Road. Surge number 4 is also 7 days of a full shutdown between National Airport and Pentagon City. Continuing on, surge number 5 repeats surge number 1, but in the opposite direction. Surge number 8 is on the blue line, Springfield to Van Dorn, 17 days of single tracking. Surge number 9 is that 42-day single tracking that I mentioned between West Falls and Vienna. Surge number 11, again, is a repeat, between East Falls and West Falls. Surge number 15 will repeat surge number 11, but 10 days of single tracking. Surge number 13, an 18-day shutdown, full shutdown between Roslyn and the Pentagon of the blue line. Surge 14, is actually being done in two different total 25-day single tracking between Braddock and Huntington, and then finally surge number 15, which is a repeat of surge number 11, a single tracking between East Falls and West Falls for 14 days. So that's the program. Happy to take questions or turn it back to Director Mitchell.
Yeah, I guess just one thing I'd like to add is you may notice that Virginia actually has the majority of surges in the first part of the program. And when the Secretary and I had some early discussions with the General Manager from WMATA about this, our main concern was making sure that we could time the surges at a point in which they would not occur during, for example, construction on I-66 or other major projects. And so in a way, it's good for us to go early because, and also during the summer when traffic tends to be a little bit lighter. I think also, though, we are a little bit of the regional guinea pig in terms of seeing how people are responding. What we've seen in Northern Virginia over the past week, the first surge was on the orange line, was that a lot of people are still trying different things out. Some people are still using the metro. They're just going earlier. Some people are figuring out TDM programs, are using the bus. A lot of people are driving. So the jury is still out on what the impacts will be during the program, I think. But we're certainly working, because we're going first, we're working hard with VDOT as well to make sure that we don't end up with a traffic nightmare in Northern Virginia because of this. The Blue Line closures will be very disruptive as well. So.
Yeah, I'll just make the comment that this is a big deal. I mean, it's very, very disruptive to the commuting population in Northern Virginia. It's also very positive in that it's the first time since I've been here that Metro has taken responsibility for safety and doing something about it in that regard. But we're monitoring, I know Charlie's people are monitoring traffic demand management and incident response, and certainly the HOV lanes, monitoring how all that is coordinating so we can be on top of it. But this is going to change habits up there. I think that's another thing that will be a byproduct of this. So from a standpoint of making sure we're doing everything we can, that's why the governor made the executive directive. This is not particularly directly tied to ask for more money, which we spoke about yesterday. This is, they have the money, it's about $60 million that is programmed, and so there's no additional ask for the cost of the repairs. We will ask for about $1 million to help supplant or enhance some of the increased bus service, other transit service that to help mitigate, and that's just a drop in the bucket compared to what other localities, what localities and all they're doing. But it is a big deal. You will see it, well, maybe not as much, because I don't know what will be going on in October of this year in Virginia. Yeah. But this is 300 days. It's almost a full, 10 months of intensive, and I suspect it'll go longer than that, and that's assuming that all the stars line up in that. So that's what's going on. It's getting a lot. It's the #1 issue in Northern Virginia in terms of transportation and infrastructure. There's a report every day in the Washington Post, or WTOP or WAMU, all the ones up there, following it very closely, and also how the communities are responding to it. So you should be aware it is a big deal, and nobody knows exactly how it's all going to pan out.
We will be up there for the governor's conference during the single tracking for the orange lines, if anyone wants to go.
So you probably will see a lot of reports on that.
Great timing.
Yeah, up there. But I think this is critical that they get this right if we're going to have that next discussion sometime in the future about additional revenues. Because without a safe, reliable system, one that people can, once they get on, have some assurance or they can get to their destination without disruption, I think the other conversation won't go very far. And that's so. Okay. Okay. Any other points? All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate the update on that. Let me see if I can get my where we are on the agenda here. Oh gosh, Mr. Donahue would not be a CTB meeting without an update on V-Trans or HP2 or Smart Scale. So welcome.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that introduction, I'm sure we're going to go very well this morning. So, members of the board, I'm here just to give you a quick update on V-Trans, and this really is going to be a brief update. You should have heard from some staff and consultants that are working with the Office of Intermodal Planning on Investment. We are going to be sitting down with each of you all individually in the coming weeks to really walk you in detail through a lot of the processes that I'm going to describe here and the outcomes for your region, to get some more one-on-one feedback, because really the amount of information, we couldn't actually go through that in a setting like this to get feedback on the specifics in each of their areas. So, just a reminder, we've been working on the V-Trans process now since early 2014, when the governor came and spoke to this board in June of that year, really asking us to focus on, what do we need to do to support goods movement for Virginia businesses and attract the workforce that we need for the 21st century. You, last December, did vote and approve the VTrans vision document, which put in place the vision, goals, and objectives, and is really the guiding policy for this VTrans process. At that time, you also adopted the needs assessment, which again is the key kind of screening process for that SMART scale, where a project must meet a need identified in the long-range plan. What we're really working on now, and I talked about this in March, is consolidating the 800 needs that were identified in that need assessment. Again, there's the corridors of statewide significance, there were the regional networks in the metro areas, and then the local growth areas, and really trying to crosswalk those, because there's a lot of overlap in certain instances, to come up with a discrete set of consolidated needs. Staff have been working with local stakeholders and reviewing this, and have taken about 800 plus needs and consolidated that down to about 160 or 70 statewide. And then what they've also been doing is working to really prioritize those needs. Because as we talked about, we received 320 plus applications in this first round of SMART Scale, and 163 are currently recommended for funding. If we keep funding at a level like that, we're going to start to clear out the pipeline of projects, and really this is about developing the future pipeline of projects that will be available and be developed in the coming years to be submitted in future rounds for evaluation. And so we've really been looking at prioritizing these consolidated needs using data, and that's really what you see, the relationship to the VTrans goals that you approved in December. We then also did a survey of stakeholders where we asked them, how do you think this relates to VTrans goals, because they may have different opinions than we will. And we also went out and did regional forums across the state where there were over 100 attendees, where we asked them to rate this in terms of local priority. And so when we come and meet with you all, what we really want to talk about is what are the prioritized needs based on this process. Get your feedback, make sure it's something that you're comfortable with, and if you're not, talk about how we can revise the process to really make sure it's something that you're happy with the end product there. Once there's consensus with you all on the priority needs in your area, what we're then going to start doing is looking for recommendations. So if we agree that X problem in the Lynchburg district is a key problem, we're then going to say, well, what are some ways we can solve this? We're going to look at the regional long-range plan, we're going to look at operational solutions, and then we're going to start to look at are there capacity needs that need to be put in place to address this. And again, the goal here is to really start to develop future projects that can be submitted for evaluation under the SMART Scale process. The second thing that we're going to talk to you about when we come and meet with you is looking at from 2025 to 2040. If you remember when we kicked off the VTrans process, we really said we were going to look out for 10 years and really focus on those needs right now, because the trends in transportation were such in flux, and we weren't really sure which way trends were going to go into the future. What we've seen for the last 10 years in terms of trends are very, very different than what we've seen historically over the 40 that preceded it. And we candidly think we know where trends are going to be for the next 10, but after that we really just aren't sure and don't have a level of certainty that allows us, we think, to plan out to 2040. So what we're going to be doing to look out to 2040 is examining scenarios. And in those scenarios, we're kind of going to look at, well, if the trends go this way, what does that mean for Virginia? Or if they go in a completely opposite direction, what could that mean? And in some ways, we're really going to test extremes to try and understand the implications of this. And what it can really help us do is understand, well, what policies are helpful regardless of which way the trends go, because that's really probably something that the board should consider implementing now, because regardless of which way the trends turn out, we know that that can be a beneficial outcome. And then as time progresses, and you all will be able to take a look at those scenarios, and we'll be able to see which way the trends are moving. And if they're moving in a certain direction, you'll kind of understand what those implications might be in advance, because we will study trends moving in that direction kind of up front. And so we plan to put together 4 different scenarios there, looking at different drivers, so different demographic changes, population changes, or economic outcomes. And really, again, from that, we're going to take a look at, well, what does that mean for congestion? What does that mean for safety? What does that mean for where we might need to make investments in infrastructure? And again, this is illustrative. We're not saying any one of these scenarios is actually what the future is going to be, but we are saying that the future, is in flux, and that it's, important for the board to consider the different ways that it could, come to pass, and understand what those implications might be. So that's really what we're hoping to talk with you all about in those individual meetings. And again, we'll be bringing lots of information that's specific to your region there, and we look forward to getting your input and feedback. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Let me have a comment, if I may. I just want to reiterate, this really is becoming a very important process because it underpins everything we do. It's no longer just checking off the box. It's whether or not a project and its real implications to people developing projects. Because remember, screening of House Bill 2, it's got to meet the need in here. And it also gets into, I think we shall have another conversation sometime about, we got a new round coming up. Well, this board is going to put projects in. I think we need to have that conversation. I said last year we had so many, but I think that's something we ought to follow back up on as we go forward in that. So this really is taking on a lot more, and it's good. I think our projects would be developed how good we do the planning. I think it's going to be steering everything we do going forward. So, Mr. Freeland, you had a question?
Yeah, on slide 14. The VMT is the measure. When did we set that as the measure rather than lane miles?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Freeland, could you provide a little more context? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Probably haven't asked it very well. Vehicle miles traveled is one measure of impact on a roadway. Lane miles is another way to do it, right? How much pavement you have down versus how many cars are going over that pavement.
So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Freeland, what this is these are outcomes that you will come out of the scenario process that we can then compare to the goals and objectives the board did adopt in there. And so what we'd be doing with the vehicle miles traveled is you would probably be comparing that to the lane miles and the capacity of roadways in different parts of the state. That's just an output that comes out of the modeling for this. One of the inputs is lane miles. And so you do have kind of assumptions there. So both are considered. I hope I'm providing a clear answer there.
Yeah, the base is the lane miles, and then we're trying to say how the outcome is how effective are they, and that's vehicle miles traveled. I think that's what I hear.
But one of the other things I think that we're looking at is historically VMT grew at a rate equal or greater to gross domestic product. Basically from the 50s all the way until the mid 2000s. We saw that change starting in about 2005, and per capita VMT right now is actually at like 1994 or 1995 levels. So I think one of the things that the scenarios are going to be evaluating is whether we see VMT per capita remain flat or if we see it start to grow at the rate it used to, which would have a very different implication for this board as you think about investments. We'll also be looking at autonomous vehicles and other things of that nature where it may say, well, VMT did go up, but with these vehicles, it actually doesn't matter on the interstates as much because we're able to use, provide more cars in that same lane mile.
Right, but, I think I understand what you're saying, but the concern in the more rural areas is replacement costs for road networks that are versus replacement costs for road networks that are heavily traveled. So I just want to make sure we got a good balance there.
And I don't think the scenario is going to envision abandoning roadways or anything of that nature there. What it's really just looking at is what are the implications outside of the state of good repair aspects for these different demographic outcomes.
You sort of said it flippantly, but you made a comment about that's when we ran out of money. And one of the things I was going to mention, and I'll do it now, I was going to wait till we did this afternoon, or later this morning probably, about the vote on the projects in House Bill 2 is that, quite frankly, make no mistake, our planning and our House Bill 2 were significantly impacted by the fact that we don't have enough money. In other words, again, we go back to the default that when most of our laws are put in for transportation, it always assumed that the transportation needs were going to be taken care of. That is not proven to be the case. Right? It is what it is. So what we're doing is making choices based on the resources we have. I mean, I saw on the comments in the paper this morning that Well, we got some, this may favor not getting high dollar projects. I think what really favors not getting high budget dollars, we don't have high dollars. I mean, I think that's, I think is really more of the real issue in dealing with. And I'll remind people as we go through next round of House Bill 2, it's going to be less than half of what we had in the first round. And the reason we're going every other year is because if not, you're allocating a few $100 million a year across the entire Commonwealth. So that is, I think that's, I think inherent all the way through, and I'm hopeful that that's one of the things that comes out of this process, as people see that these are the consequences of having this level of dollars. I'm not saying they're good or bad, but these are the consequences. And so I think that point is, well, I think we are going to start highlighting that, you know, this board is charged with allocating what is given. And so I think this is a much better way, regardless of how much we're given, to allocate, but I think it's also going to point out, I hope that this is what we're leaving on the table. These are the consequences of having this amount of dollars based on when I say the needs, not the wants, but the needs of infrastructure, state of good repair, and then we have now hopefully made a little more objective, here are the projects we're not doing. Or if we're going to do a $2 billion project, we have little choice but to do it, other than considering third-party revenues. We have little choice. Not a matter of whether it's sort of taking it out of the theoretical realm and saying, well, either we do it or we don't, based on these are the available resources. And I hope that leads to better discussion about what we're allocating, which is, our General Assembly, we're Dillon Rule State. They're the ones that appropriate those funds. So anyway, I think it's a good point that sort of underpins all that these reforms are doing. And that. Well, that'll be the shortest presentation we've heard in this regard. But thank you, Mr. Donahue. I think, again, this is going to be a very important part of our planning going forward. Okay, I think we're down to, in the workshop, just some updates from Charlie and Jennifer. So, Charlie, why don't you start with
I have two items. There's been some discussion with some board members regarding the revenue sharing program, and really it relates to the program is oversubscribed, more asked than we have funds available. And the question really is to the proration portion of that. So what we're going to be doing, Julie Brown and our folks are going to be looking at that as we move forward with revenue sharing. There may be a combination of policy, well, likely a combination of policy and potentially even some legislative need in order to make adjustments to both to the statute but also to the board policy. I get the sense from the board, one of the primary focuses is making sure that we're putting the money to work and that it's not accruing in accounts for extended periods of time. That's a theme across VDOT. It is in our maintenance program. It is with the Smart Scale program. Got it first time.
Yeah, that's right.
It is, and I think it should be with our other programs also. That we're again putting the money to work. So I just want to let the board know that we'll be bringing that back to you probably later on this summer. No later than early fall, with maybe some different ideas on revenue sharing.
Okay, one point on that, if I may. We heard loud and clear that's still the one thing, revenue sharing, in a lot of different areas. But that gets back to this conversation about dollars, because had we kept it at the levels it was at, it would have been greater than the House Bill 2 allocations projected over the 6-year plan, which sort of defeats the whole purpose of House Bill. Smart Scale going forward. So we're going to monitor it, but I mean, I think that, again, it gets back to the limiting factor of, what it is, the pot of monies that we have to allocate. So, Spellin.
I don't think I got the memo. HB2 is now Smart Scale?
It is Smart Scale. Yeah, it was supposed to now yesterday, and so let me get, scale is an easy one. That is the even though it's 5 letters, there are 2 E's in the factors that we use for scoring these projects: safety, congestion mitigation, accessibility, land use, and the 2 E's, economic development and environment. Yeah, so that was SMART. It was sort of a combination. SMART deals with, and Mr. Johnny, you may have to help me on this one, the system for the
management
and allocation.
resources for transportation.
Smart.
We won't be
Yeah,
writing that out a lot.
That's right. I think it's a scale process, but we thought we should put something
There
behind
is that
that.
other HB2 in another state.
Well, that sort of hastened our move to, let's start calling it, because if you Google House Bill 2, it used to be, it was all about us. It's no longer about us anymore.
Let me ask a question, if I could, on the revenue sharing piece. There is, and I get it, you're exactly correct. That's the concern, is we're putting money on projects that need more money before they're going to be real. But the other concern that I think some of us have is, or rather to speak for everybody, maybe it's just me, is when we allocate that money partially, the next round, that partial allocation takes precedence.
It becomes a tier 1
It
project.
becomes a tier 1 project, and so there's the ability to game that system, if you will. So you just ask for what you don't ask for everything you need, or you ask for a lot, and then knowing that you're going to get it, you just got to wait a little bit longer. So, and that may be fine. I hope y'all look at that.
We are.
Yeah.
The second item I have is an update on the Office of Transportation Public-Private Partnerships, the P3 office. Let me give you just a quick background. In 2010, that office reported to the Commissioner's office and reported to me. Shortly thereafter, we worked to move them into separate quarters and really give them an opportunity, I'll use the term incubate, to grow outside of the structure of VDOT and grow the program. And as you know, several projects were undertaken. We're currently actively involved in the 66 outside the Beltway, but we're also working on adjustments, amendments, changes to existing P3s. And it was just felt it was time to I'll use the term, integrate the office more closely with VDOT. So they will be reporting to the Commissioner's office, and that change is effective immediately. But in terms of their mission, I think it's important to reinforce we have active P3s underway, and that will be one of their primary focuses. That unit is very good at what I'll call project management, in terms of putting ideas together and doing all of the difficult work it takes to bring together one of these projects. They have access to subject matter experts, but they don't have the operational expertise and the construction expertise. That's always been within VDOT. So again, they will be continuing to do that type of work. In addition to that, we now have over half a dozen active concessions in VDOT. Some of those are within the umbrella of the PPTA, the Public-Private Transportation Act. So within that umbrella, we have a number of active projects that are, I'll call it in the long-term partnership. And one of the things that we have not done is to institutionalize and to create a single point where we are providing, I'll call it partnership relations. These concessions, whether it's a 10-year, 20, 50-year, or longer concession, there will always be need to make adjustments to the agreements. There are sales, there are refinancings that go on. There will be changes in terms of, as technology changes, there will be the need for us to go in and make changes to those contracts. So I really see this as an important role of this office. And again, it's been sort of scattered amongst VDOT, but our portfolio now is to a scale that we really need to have dedicated resources there. And then the third really is in what I'll call future partnerships. Some of those partnerships will be under the PPTA, under that provision of law, but they also have worked with us in the past and will continue in the future other partnerships with other entities. And I think this ties in very well with some of the discussions on the subcommittee on innovation and technology. It's not just technology and innovation, but I see that as a real component. I'll just throw up some examples where this office will provide us project management support, area sponsorships. And we've worked with various units within the agency regarding things like the rest area sponsorships, regarding the potential sponsorship of Safety Service Patrol, and some other things like that that potentially generate revenue. Data sharing is another area where we're currently working with Waze on sharing some transportation data. And there's agreements and things that need to happen in order to make those a reality. So that's another area where they'll be working. Energy, both the energy in terms of energy on what I mean by energy, our lighting systems, our other energy systems within the department. There's some opportunities there working with the Department of Mine, Mineral and Energy and others to improve energy efficiency within our footprint. There's also solar and some of those things we've heard about, opportunities for solar arrays and the like. Broadband is another area very important to the Commonwealth. We currently do have agreements with cellular providers, both for fiber and towers. And again, that's another area where today it really takes that division administrator or that district engineer, it takes a lot of their time just managing these potential partnerships. And then I also think that in terms of what I'll call innovation pilots, there are some things that have been talked about in the subcommittee on innovation technology, and there are opportunities to partner with entities, with companies. And one of the things that I think that the P3 office can do is help to bring those together and to package them so that we can enter into those partnerships. Because they operate out of what I'll call the high production area of VDOT, they can really work on these kind of unique types of projects. So again, they will be physically moving back to headquarters here. And again, we'll be reporting to the Commissioner's office. And we really look forward, I'll call it the next step in the evolution of public-private partnerships.
Yeah. Just a couple of comments. Charlie has really attacked it from how it's going to integrate with VDOT, but there was some policy behind it too. We reformed our P3, which a couple of you guys were involved with in this. The P3, part of that is we had legislation, our design bill with ATC. A lot of things we do is no longer a P3. It's actually something that VDOT can do without going into that procurement. But it really is a procurement, and it's not a substitute for public dollars. There was an article this morning. I don't know if y'all saw the JLARC just completed our audit of risk in the Commonwealth, and I think you'll see a very familiar theme there, that the risk was not being appropriately analyzed. So we've gone through that, I see this as a two-way street. Putting it back, because quite frankly, these large procurements, they're going to require third parties, are going to be transportation. We have the PPEA Act, which Department they do, but it's going to be transportation. And so it's another tool, depending on who the procuring agency is to use, depending on that particular project. So that's what it's about. It is getting it back in there where it can do all the things that Charlie's talked about and more, and also help VDOT, because the primary, of all the reforms we've done, a primary focus of that is the assessment of risk. And the assessment of risk can come in many forms. It's not just financial going through. So having those people all together in that makes, and monitoring these projects as we go out, it makes a lot of sense. So that's some more background behind this move. We have talked with our partners in the private industry, and they're very comfortable. This does not mean a de-emphasis of public-private partnerships by any means. It means getting it in the right place so we can respond appropriately when that is the right chosen procurement.
Mr. Chairman, because I just read the article quickly. And it's really sort of coming after the battle's over and coming out and shooting the wounded. I mean, that they're citing things that we don't do anymore. And so, I think the response from the administration ought to be, that's fine, but we've done X, Y, and Z, and we do evaluate that risk. And one of the new P3 guidelines that Marty and I worked on is clear about that risk and calculating it and putting a number on it. And, so this is okay, fine, but.
Well, and the reporter did mention that there had been reforms in there but look, it also, it does serve a purpose, Mr. Fillon, because it is the General Assembly, by their own devices now, we've been saying this ever since we've gotten here, and so I think it's a verification that they found the same thing we did. We've taken action.
I agree with that. I think as the administration prepares for next session, there may be a reaction to this that is overdone.
Right.
Because of the headline. So.
Yeah, I agree.
And regarding the JLARC report, the focus of that report was on the broad procurement, state procurement on the broadest sense. There were references to the PPTA and to the 460 project. There were references to VDOT. One of the things that there were a number of areas in the report that really highlighted some of the good things that VDOT has done in the past and continues to do in the area of what we call our dashboard, or our monitoring on time and on budget. In terms of us working with the Office of the Attorney General on our contracting vehicles. I mean, that's something that we have done for years, working on both standard specifications but also specialized contracting, working with the Attorney General's office and their staff and their consultants in making sure that we have strong legal documents. So that there's always a lot to learn in these reports. But again, and we were very much involved in working with JLARC and having discussions with them about some areas, making sure that the report clearly showed the things that VDOT has done in terms of protecting our procurement process and getting best value.
On the Attorney General piece, I couldn't agree more with JLARC on that. There's no question that there's a natural tension between two elected officials, sometimes not of the same party, providing legal advice on something that we want to do. And I think, having said that, the professionals in those offices are they're just lawyers giving you legal advice. And I think sometimes we've got advice we don't like, so we got hired a lawyer. And that's not a good way to do it.
Well, I see Mr. Allen sitting back there. I think he would attest to the relation. We quickly changed that when we came in, and the report pointed out there were, because of client privilege, there were some things that the public will not know that was given to the administration, so. You're right. I think having that, we may not always agree, but they know where we stand and vice versa. And I think that's the type of relationship you have to have. Also, I would point out, I do think there may be some action out of the General Assembly. I'm hopeful, based on the comments I've heard, that the reforms we've done will be their model. In other words, how they look at other areas. And assessing, because they certainly we got a big issue with the VDOT contract. I mean, I'm just seeing what was reported by the state and other things. But again, it's about sort of consistent with what I've been saying. Risk changes from deal to deal. It can't be institutionalized, and it shouldn't just be overlooked. Which it appears that report clearly said that was the case, that it was going on in here. So. Mr. Connors.
Thank you. Mr. Kilpatrick, thank you for that update, because as we're learning on our subcommittee, it is going to take a public-private partnership as innovation and technology accelerates. They're not waiting on us to get our act together. The industry's moving very fast on a lot of these initiatives, and we're going to have to respond to it. And there is going to be some inherent risk, Mr. Fralin. And as we innovate and pilot new technologies to make our transportation system work better, so this is a good step in the right direction, because I know you're hearing, and I want to applaud your folks too for really stepping up to the plate and showing us some true innovation going on inside VDOT. And we need to get DRPT. We need to make sure that's integrated too. That came up this morning as well. Just make sure everybody's integrated so that we have a true multimodal transportation plan. Thank you.
Yeah, and there's a lot of opportunities in there with not just broadband, but our right-of-way. There's a whole lot of, it's basically looking at it from an entrepreneurial perspective instead of a bureaucratic. And that's an oversimplification. But that's really what it is, and understanding what is good being offered by the private party and what may not be in the interest of the state in that. But being able to, I actually think the real purpose of the P3 laws was not the default procurement, but it's to get it set up to say, hey, if there's something in the private sector, we need to harvest that, not default to it. I think that's the key. And actually, I think there's quite a bit that can be harvested in that. So,
thank you.
Okay, Charlie, you have anything else?
No, that's it.
Yeah, on that. I don't think I have any. I think we've gone. I'm sorry, Jennifer. Yeah, Jennifer. Yeah, you got quite a few.
I just had a couple updates for you as well. I know we've heard a lot this morning about WMATA, and just an update on the work that we're doing up there right now. As some of you may be aware, it's been reported very widely in the Washington Post as well, the states as well as the city of D.C. are being charged with creating what's called a Metro Safety Commission, and this is something that is of very keen interest to Secretary Fox of US DOT as well. You may recall that in February they sent us a letter establishing a deadline of February of 2017 for creating this commission, which needs legislation in all three jurisdictions. We need to pass identical legislation to create an interstate compact. They have laid out a deadline after February of 8th of 2017. They can begin to withhold some of our statewide transit funds that will affect not just the DC area, but some of our transit agencies around the state. We've made them aware that there's no way we can meet that deadline because our legislative sessions won't even end until March, but we're working with them on that moving forward. We've made very good progress. We have drafted legislation that's been agreed to by all three parties. We're still working out some final details I will say it's been, there's a lot of policy implications to creating a new safety oversight organization that has enforcement authority and the ability to compel another interstate compact to take actions to remediate any sort of safety related issues. But it's a very, very important step that needs to be taken. We are in the process of vetting this draft legislation. It was released to the public, I believe, 2 weeks ago, and we wanted to go ahead and make sure that we went ahead and got it out there to demonstrate the success that we've had so far as a group in doing this. And I can't emphasize enough just the amount of work that it's taken to work through these issues with three parties. A lot of time spent in windowless conference rooms with whiteboards working through things, but it's been a very good collaborative relationship with Maryland and DC, and probably not just on safety issues, but I would say has probably improved our relationship on WMATA issues overall significantly. So I think it'll be positive at the end of the day. DC intends to submit the legislation or introduce it in their because they meet year round. Introduce it in July, and then they'll go on recess, but then take it up in earnest in the fall. We're also speaking with some of our legislative leaders here in Virginia, also in Maryland, about holding advance hearings with some of the Transportation Committee members in advance of the General Assembly session starting, so that by the time we get to the beginning of the session, a lot of the issues have been vetted and worked out, because obviously if we in Virginia changes something, Maryland and DC have to agree to it, and it's going to be a very iterative process. We're trying to get through that before the legislative session. But then, again, the goal is that we and Maryland would introduce the legislation in January, We have already received some interest from our Joint Transportation Accountability Commission has sent a letter to the chair of the WMATA board emphasizing that any work on the Metro Safety Commission should not be tied to a funding discussion of WMATA. They've also suggested that we should ask WMATA as a condition of this to revisit its labor agreements. We've stated that that this is a separate issue. The labor agreements is an operational issue that needs to be dealt with by WMATA. So anyway, I wanted to give you all an update on that. It's going to be a big focus of effort of our organization, working very closely with DC and Maryland over the next several months, and then hopefully being able to advance and pass a clean version of legislation next summer. Next spring. Aubrey and I both attended, as well as Mr. Dyke attended a very good session yesterday up at the Greater Washington Board of Trade, convened a group of business leaders and public sector leaders as well to talk about this issue of funding and the potential for a dedicated funding source. WMATA does have some major financial issues coming up, not just certainly on the capital side with safety issues. There's also some unfunded pension liabilities and some things like that have to be dealt with. We're pleased to be part of that discussion. I think the Secretary had made some very salient points and comments about what it will take in Virginia to be able to advocate for more funding for WMATA specifically. But I think we're looking forward to continuing to work with everyone in the region up there. But our priority right now is the safety issues. Dealing with that first before we can tackle the funding. So finally, I just wanted to mention, I know Steve talked about this a little bit the other day, but in regard to transit funding in general, we've established, there was a legislation last year that directed us to establish this group called the Transit Capital Project Revenue Advisory Board, which will be looking at this issue of long-term transit funding and both taking a deeper dive on our needs versus the revenue sources and looking at potential new revenue sources, but also recommending a new prioritization framework for our capital funds, which is a very different way of doing business for DRPT. It'll be a prioritization framework that resembles HB2 with the 5 factors, the SMART scale with the 5 factors. And then also a new prioritization method for our stated good repair program, which is based on an asset management approach and asset condition, things like that. We've got until July of 2017 to complete our work and bring back recommendations to the General Assembly. It's going to be a very heavy load. We tend to also use, you may have heard this before about the Transit Service Delivery Advisory Committee, to come up with better acronyms for these groups, but that's the group that's been working with DRPT on prioritization and on allocating operating funding for many years. We plan to use that group in addition to this other advisory board to help us tackle all of these issues in the next, it's almost really 12 months. So Mr. Williams has agreed to serve on the advisory board. We're very pleased about that. It's made up of some other local and state officials, and we have our first meeting on Thursday. So we're looking forward to getting started, and we'll be bringing back updates on that as we go along. So that's all of my updates for now.
I think Ms. Mitchell's report is going to have a consistent refrain here for a while, and WMATA is a big deal. It's working through that. So I did want to give you an update on a couple things. First of all, our Fast Lane grant, we should hear anytime. We have been in contact with both FHWA, FRA. I know the governor has reached out to Secretary Fox. It will be, I'm very comfortable. We have a very, very competitive grant. Just remind you all, it's about $1 billion in foreign work. We've asked for $200 million, $225 million, including a Tiger grant. It's bringing both private and state funds along with the federal funds for a significant group of projects or suite of projects here in the Commonwealth. But we'll know it's only $800 million being allocated across the country, but we should know here in the next, probably the next couple weeks, maybe before that in there. So a couple other things that are high profile that don't directly report to the board, but there's transportation monies in just to keep you updated. First of all, the Port of Virginia. You all know about $350 million, the bond that will renovate NIT, North International Terminals. But there are other capital going on. There's renovations going on here at the Richmond port. And we continue, we have reached business terms with the extension of the lease of Virginia International Gateway. We're working through the administrative and bonding requirements, going through that. I know John Reinhardt was up this past week working with the Resources Authority as we go through that to make sure we're working towards sometime the end of July, it looks like, is when that'll all be completed. So that's going on in case from that you've got good questions in that. High profile, I guess it's a court case, and we're involved with it at DMV, is the Tesla has moved to opening a second distribution center here in Richmond. And the national car dealer, or the state car dealers have objected to that. It's actually a lawsuit in saying that Tesla should not be able to open that up. The process will go through the DMV, who monitors that. That inspector will make a recommendation to Director Holcomb, and then he will make a decision. But there is a court case that is going on along with that. So I just wanted to give you a heads up that was going on. Spaceport, which you also put monies in, had a successful test fire of the new engines and the pad a couple weeks ago. All went well. So we'll be returning to space flight sometime this year. Tentatively it's July, but that could slip depending on testing that has to go on with the actual new payload and where they are. But good news happening there. So just a few things that don't directly impact you, but transportation money, trust fund monies go to support those activities. Want to keep you up to speed on that.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question about VRT, Richmond VRT?
Yep.
Is that the Tiger grant you're referencing?
No.
We've already gotten that one?
We've already gotten that one, yes. And that one continues on
GRTC
schedule.
has gotten it,
GRTC,
yeah.
Gotten that one.
Yeah.
There's several, glad you brought that up. There's several Tiger grants that the state, by entities of the state that have gone forward. The Tiger grant I was speaking of, we asked $200 million under the Fast Lane grant and $25 million under the Tiger grant to support those suite of projects. But the port's put in a couple of Tiger grant requests, other entities across.
What projects we asked them for?
That's 395, the freight quarter on 95, the VRE expansion, the additional track, the Long Bridge. There's 395 extension is in that. There is a parking lot. As a whole, it's $1.4 billion worth of projects. Some of which, I want to be clear, some of which will go forward if we don't get the grant. But for instance, we're planning a 2-mile extension of the express lanes in Gainesville. We get the grant, that will allow us to maybe go further, much further than that. So it's not a matter of pulling projects out, it's a matter of getting the, that's what we're trying to impress upon our federal partners, that these things are much, the sum of the parts is not as great as the whole. Put it together, it's the most traveled network in the southeast, including Atlanta, Miami, all and other large cities. That area is the most congested. So hopefully we'll be positive on that. But there are some other Tiger grants that were requested, but that was our governor's number one priority for that suite of projects up there. I think that's all the updates I had. Does anybody on the board have anything before we go into the action item agendas? Okay, if not, we'll now call to close the work session, and now we'll come into the actual agenda items for the formal session. The first topic would be the approval of the minutes from May 18th. Oh, will we do that first? Public comment for the minutes? Okay. First, I'm sorry. Public comment will be first. Do we have anybody that signed up, or if you have anybody would like to address the Transportation Board? Yes. Ms. Schwartz, please come up.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, members of the Commonwealth Transportation Board. I'm Stuart Schwartz. I'm the Executive Director of the Coalition for Smarter Growth. I mainly wanted to come to talk about some general themes, but also specifically about Metro. First, thank you for all the hard work of this staff, this staff that you have here in all these agencies, because I've never seen so much change, improvement, clarification to how we prioritize transportation projects and how we fund them. Whether it is the system for management of allocation of resources for transportation, for safety, et cetera, smart scale, or HB 1887 and the reconciliation of our funding streams. I think it makes it easier for the public to track everything. And as you've noted, we don't have enough money. We never will, so therefore we have to do the right sort of prioritization. In that regard, I can't emphasize enough the continued focus on smart growth in the Commonwealth, how important it is. We need the other agencies to work with you all so that we are focusing resources to support the revitalization of our cities and towns, not just in the urban crescent, but a Roanoke, a Danville, a Martinsville as well. That's where the economies are going. That's where the demographics and market demand are going. You know, when the CEO of Marriott says that he's moving his company from an office park to a metro station, that gets everybody's attention, and that's what's happening. When CarMax, of all companies, is putting jobs in downtown D.C., focusing on cars, that's a sign. Capital One itself I think it's having trouble attracting employees to its site in the outer suburbs of Richmond, but it's certainly expanding next to a metro station in Tyson's Corner. So that's one of those trends, as the Deputy Secretary talked about, we have to follow. In this regard, we would still like to see more significant investment in transit for the future of the Commonwealth at $3.7 billion total compared to $10.7 billion for the highway side. I think we can still do better. We are an urbanizing state, and that is the future. Certainly, if we're going to fight climate change, we have to create mixed-use, walkable communities, reduce vehicle miles traveled, and provide more access to transit. In this regard comes Metro. We have great confidence in this new general manager. We had always wanted to see a leader and a manager there, and much like the team we have here, that's what we have, and that's been very important. It's important that he is helping us build the confidence for the future. It's also important that your leadership and those with your counterparts in the other state be as focused, confident, strong, give the public the confidence that we're making progress, and then we'll be able to win the funding that the system needs. It is, I heard some of the discussion yesterday, the Northern Virginia area is one of the prime economic engines. The Washington, D.C. region is one of the prime economic engines for this Commonwealth, and Metro is essential to that. We can't function without it, as you can see in 66 and Route 50 recently under Safe Track. So this reinvestment has to be done. Failure is not an option. We need to do it. We need to find the ways politically to make it happen. And that includes, of course, we can document the economic benefits of it, the fiscal benefits to the Commonwealth, the transportation benefits, and so forth. Certainly Metro has to prove itself in this process, and I think they are doing that. The other place where I think it is really important at this time of mistrust of government is what you're doing with Safe Track alternatives. And what the businesses are doing, what we're all doing, we have to deliver on these alternatives for Safe Track. They have to work well. People have to get the information in an easy-to-use manner. They have to, we have to encourage a can-do attitude on their part, but we certainly have to show that we can deliver clearly on these alternatives. So that's our first test in creating confidence for Metro. I think we can meet it, and I thank you for all of your great work.
Mr. Schwartz? Anyone else that would like to address the Transportation Board? All right, seeing none, now we'll move on to the approval of the May 18th minutes. Is there a motion? Motion. Second. Any discussion or comments? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? First up, we have Jennifer Allen, and the state of good repair. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I present to you today for your consideration a resolution related to the state of good repair. The state of good repair resolution contains the state of good repair process, prioritization and process methodology, as well as the funding distribution percentages for fiscal year 17 and fiscal year 18. Are there any questions?
Hearing none, is there a motion for approval?
I move to approve.
Is there a second? Second. Any further comments or additional comments or discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, resolution passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, Ms. Brown. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I have several resolutions for your approval of several of our special funding programs and payments to localities. So I will take them in order. All of these have been presented to you previously in one of our workshop sessions, either like yesterday or last month. The first item is action on the FY17 revenue sharing allocations. We would recommend your approval.
So moved.
We have a move and a second. Okay, and now, Mr. Tunk, you need to, you recuse yourself from that stuff. Okay, we have a motion for approval and a second. Is there any discussion or comments? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Mr. Chairman, I would say it's hard to follow it without knowing the number of the page that we're on.
Oh, on the...
It's not hard to follow you, Julie. I've got 166 pages here.
Page 14.
It says resolution 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If it could say what the resolution's about,
Yes.
instead of just a number, that
On
would
the side.
that would be
Yeah.
helpful.
So you hit the bookmark, and that will tell you to, you're right, it should have said resolution revenue sharing. So, Ken, you got that now?
I didn't.
Okay, so,
And we're on resolution 2.
so.
So we're not on 14 anymore. We're on page.
It's page
You can
14.
do it either way.
It is,
You
yeah.
can do it by
You can
that way.
flip it, or you can go up to the bookmark, and it'll take you down. And what we, in the future, we'll say revenue sharing resolution. So, okay, so.
And Mr. Chairman, while everybody's coming, it would actually be really helpful if the staff had one of these so they would know what we were looking at when they begin speaking to an item. They could say, turn to resolution, because they don't know, you guys don't have what we have, correct?
Not right here.
Right, so it would be very helpful if they could do that and say, go to tab 2 or resolution 2 or resolution 3, so we could then follow their lead. I mean, that would be probably the easiest thing in addition to.
All right.
Absolutely, we make that happen.
Okay, back on resolution 1.
2.
Resolution 2, excuse me, resolution 2. We have a motion for approval and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, all right. Ms.
Okay.
Brown.
Next, the third action item is the action on the FY17 High Volume Unpaved Road Program allocations. You should have a list of the recommended projects, and we would move for your approval.
That would be resolution 3 for all those who want to call that up. Okay, is there a first or a second?
Approval.
Need some help? Okay. Was that a motion for approval?
Yes.
Yes. Is there a second?
Motion.
Second.
Any discussion or comments? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, Ms. Brown?
The next item is the FY17 Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, Transportation Alternative Set Aside Project Approval. You should have a list of those projects in your packet, and we would recommend your approval.
What page are those projects on? So
49.
49. So
That's resolution number 4.
resolution number 4.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Okay, second, okay. Any comments or discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, Ms. Brown?
The next item, action item number 5, is the action on the Arlington and Henrico counties maintenance payments for FY17. This is a presentation that I made yesterday, and we will bring back a white paper as requested based on the summary of previous studies as well as a comparison of maintenance allocations for those counties. We would move for your approval.
Page 63, resolution number 6.
I would move to adopt the resolution. Second.
And second. Any other comments or discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Okay, that was the county resolution. Action item number 6 is for the payments to urban localities, those cities and towns that maintain their urban system. This is the other part of the presentation I made yesterday. You should have a list of those proposed allocations. We would move for your approval.
Everybody got the resolution?
69, yes.
Yep, 69, yes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Any discussion or comments? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Okay. Action item number 7 is action on the FY17 Primary Extension Improvement Program allocations. This is the presentation that I made last month. This one is a little confusing in that this year, for primary extensions, those urban localities are receiving funding from 2 different sources. One is from the CTB formula funds, which are the funds we've been using for several years to fund those primary extensions. This year, they're also receiving state of good repair funding. So you have 2 different lists in your packet of the projects that are being recommended for allocations for this year. We would recommend your approval.
And that's on page 111?
Now, Mr. Chairman, a question.
Yes.
So under Resolution 7, there are 2 resolutions. One's a policy and one's the allocation. Are we voting on both or just one?
It's just a resolution to approve it. I think you may have a reference of what was the policy approved by the
Yeah,
board
it's
previously.
only one resolution, yes.
Okay.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. Is there a second?
Second.
Second?
May I ask a question as well?
Yes, any comments, questions? Ms. Fallon?
I just brought up with Ms. Brown yesterday, because there are the 2 now sources of revenue, I was just sharing, my incomplete understanding about how our localities actually apply for the state of good repair money. And so one of the things Ms. Brown had offered, or perhaps we could work out, so that we understand how the money is accessed through the program. Did we actually meet with localities, or do they understand how this works? And
I mean, when this program was initiated, we had basically a webinar with all localities, and we invited them, and we basically went through the process, explained what the scoring criteria is. When we kick off the application process, we send letters to every locality, and we tell them where they can go on our webpage to get the data, basically the condition data for their payments, and outline the process for them for how they can apply for funding.
I just say that because under state of good repair from the localities, one city accessed money, another city did not in my jurisdiction. Only 2 localities actually went through the state of good repair. I just wanted to make sure when that was brought to my attention, I just didn't know if there was confusion or was just, perhaps as a board member, I didn't know exactly how.
And what we'll continue to do with the state of good repair 2 programs. The old primary extension program is sunsetting, and for pavements, and it's being replaced by the state of good repair programs. We want to ensure, working through our district engineers and their resident engineers and staff, that every jurisdiction understands how to apply for both under the bridge program and under the pavement extension program, how to apply for those. When we say localities, where we're talking about incorporated cities and towns that maintain their own systems, not on the county systems, or not on the state-maintained county system, county network, because we will be doing those projects.
But remember, they have to give that condition report to him, so he has it
for the locally maintained
urbans,
system.
and so that's one they'll be made later this year.
How long is the transition period?
Julie, when does the old primary extension program end?
2020.
2020. And I believe in the intervening time, there is some state of good repair money that's being used. There is both old CTB formula and there is the new state of good repair. So we're in this transition. We're retiring that CTB formula program and it's fully integrating this new state of good repair program.
Correct.
I may
Mr.
follow up
Tom?
with you.
Just to add to Shannon's comments, I think it would be helpful if the state, it seemed this year the state of good repair projects lagged behind the HB2 projects. And I think it would be helpful if they advanced at the same time. So the localities can sit down and take a look and say, well, do we want state of good repair or do we want an HB2? Or,
Well, remember, they're going to be alternating every year after this year.
Right.
So they'll be a focus every other year. So, but you're right. Good point. Yeah. Any other comments or discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Okay. And then our last item, action item number 8, is an economic development access project request. This is for Centerpoint Intermodal Center in the city of Suffolk. This is a request for a bonded project. They requested the maximum allocation of $650,000. We would recommend your approval.
Mr. Malvin in here, I know he would recommend this highly for
Having used to
this
have been
project.
there, I would say that we adopt.
So, Mr. Williams,
Still have family there.
yeah. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you, Ms. Brown. Oh, sorry. Ms. Pryor's up. I'm just used to them coming up, so good.
Good morning, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. I have 2 items for you today. The first is just our approval of our normal monthly transfers. We recommend your approval.
And these are under, what tab are these under? This would be
9.
Resolution 9, yes. So if anybody wanted to go ahead, you got to go through those. I don't think there's anything unusual in these transfers.
13.
So moved.
There's a moval for adoption. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or comments? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
All right. Second item, on behalf of DRPT and VDOT, I'm recommending your approval of the FY17 to 22 6-year improvement program.
Mr. Chairman, can I,
Yes.
I need to abstain on one of these, and I've got the app ID, but I'm looking for the UPC. So I need to pull that out of the block. It's app ID 510, City of Salem Multimodal Improvements, Boulevard, Roanoke.
Okay,
Veterans.
so we can take that as a separate matter.
Don't I have to find the UPC?
I can find
We
it.
we got that
she can get that. You just identify the project, we'll pull that out and vote on that separately.
That's what I need to do.
Yeah, so let's, do we need a motion to pull that out? I guess we do.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to pull that out of the block so that I can abstain on it. I need to state the reason for the abstention. It's nearby a facility that I have ownership in and operate. I don't think it will impact it, but tangentially, but it might impact it. So I would like to abstain on it.
Right. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion or comments? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. So that project, any opposed? That project we'll vote on, we'll have 2 votes. The first vote will be on the entire 6-year plan without that project in there. And I'll just remind everybody, I believe this is a very historic vote you're getting ready to undertake here because of the smart scale selection criteria. So is there a motion?
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any comments or further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? I think we should take a moment to reflect. I think that's a pretty big vote. You guys have been part of history here today. First time in modern history, and maybe ever, that objective measures have been used in helping you determine your selection. So I think that's pretty cool. So anyway, been part of history. All right, now, the second is the project that is pulled out of the block. I'll let you describe that project, Ms. Pryor, again for the group.
You'll have to-
It's described multimodal improvements along Boulevard-Roanoke for veterans. It's in the city of Salem, and it is app ID 510.
All right, so we will, Mr. Freeland abstains on that. Is there a motion for approval for that project? So Mr. Rhodes says, is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any other comments or discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, project's in. Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pryor. Mr. Lawson.
Well, Mr. Secretary, members of the board, before you, you have the resolution to approve the CTF, the VDOT and DRPT budgets for 2017. Steve and I are prepared to answer any questions you may have.
So this will be one action item for the entire, for both budgets. They're actually encumbered because the DRPT's money come through the trust fund, so it's actually one vote.
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other comments or discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Mr. Lawson, Mr. Pitter, thank you very much. Ms. Shaw.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the board. On behalf of the department, I want to recommend approval of a resolution you have before you. This is on 66 outside the Beltway, between University Boulevard in Prince William County and the Capitol Beltway in Fairfax County. There are three items, or three parts of this resolution that we're asking you to consider and approve. The first is to designate the lanes as hot lanes between these 2 points, and this would be effective when we open the project after we have signed a service commencement notice to proceed. We anticipate that would be in late 2020, but certainly no earlier than January 2nd, 2020, because that's in agreement with what is in the Code of Virginia. In addition, we're asking you to approve the finding that is in Attachment A. It also is documented in our technical report, which is online on our project website. And you might recall from the presentation yesterday, we documented that we have data to support that this action is in the public interest, that it is supported by quantitative and qualitative evidence that the HOV3 designation will facilitate flow of traffic in the corridor, both for the general purpose lanes as well as the express lanes, and then it also helps us comply with the Clean Air Act because it reduces the overall vehicle miles traveled in the corridor. And then lastly, we're asking that you designate that this the occupancy requirement be for HOV3. So with that, I recommend approval.
So moved. You require this is in compliance with Virginia law when we convert under a P3, has to go to a hot lane, and this is allowing the procurement to continue forward. So is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Any comments or discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Ms. Shaw.
Thank you.
Ms. Baxter, Ms. here.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, today we are seeking approval of the award of the toll system and services contract for the Transform 66 Inside the Beltway project. This contract is recommended to be awarded to TransCore. Specifically, this contract includes an initial contract amount of $17 million, roughly, almost $18 million, and then a 5-year operation and maintenance period for an additional $10 million. That is the monies that will be funded from the previously authorized funds from the board. Also, there's a contract option for an additional 5-year period, operations and maintenance. That's a total value of $12 million roughly that will be paid for by the toll revenues. Also, the schedule on this contract is closely coordinated with the contract that Mr. Siles is going to speak to you about. So we are recommending your approval to award this contract to TransCore.
Chairman, I have a question. Is the contract we're going to award later for the widening?
No, sir. No, there's two contracts. There's tolling operations, which is TransCore. There's a separate contract for the physical gantry system that is being presented to you for approval.
Is the widening on the 6-year plan?
It is.
Yes.
It is.
So we already approved that.
Yes, and that project is currently in development, working towards a design-build procurement near future.
Yes, yeah, that's correct. Motion, is there a second? Second. Any other comments or discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Baxter, thank you. Mr. Solly's, we have some contracts to go through.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We have one project today that needs CTB action, and as previously stated, this is the civil works to support Ms. Baxter's technology product. We had two bidders on this. We feel that it represents fair market value, and we're recommending award to Fort Myer Construction Corporation.
Yes, Mr. Rosen.
Thank you. I assume others on the board have this question, which is the estimate. It's basically twice what the estimate was. What accounts for that?
I can put that in the chief engineer's words. We basically missed it. We blew the estimate. But
wish I had a more cerebral answer, but that's really
I was looking for some technical.
And I think that in terms of it is. It's an accelerated schedule, a highly accelerated schedule with disincentives for late completion, and again, that we're seeing in there it's a higher level of risk. It's also a contract that we don't do a lot of these, frankly. As a matter of fact, this is the only standalone, at least in recent history, all electronic toll gantry project that we've done. So again, not a lot of data in our systems to say, all right, what do these things cost? And even nationwide, typically this kind of work is inside of a much bigger highway project. You don't typically go in and put in these types of systems as a standalone project.
Yeah, it's a good test case in a sense.
Absolutely.
For the future.
I think this is, Mr. Chairman, if I could, this is a one, because Mr. Kilpatrick is correct. This is new business. We haven't built a toll gantry in 30 years or more. And when we decided to take this project on internally rather than do a P3 or some sort of combination, we can't have double cost estimates coming in on this or our revenue projections being wrong. So I think it's just a cautionary tale about something that we're embarking on that we really haven't done. And so, if we need to beef up our consultants or make sure
Yeah, I'd agree. And I would tell you what the incentive is because the payoff is so high.
Right.
I mean, the reward. And so a fair point. And I think the team understands that too. In that. And this cost is contemplated in the entire cost of the project. So we're not over budget on the entire cost. We budgeted understanding exactly your point.
Is this project also going to be paid through the tolls?
That is correct, yes. It's paid through the tolling revolving facilities.
Coming off that top.
Yeah.
So, yes, the toll monies, as we recall, can be used to repay for construction, and then the operation of the road, and then improvements in there. So they'll be, the debt service will be repaid.
So your concessionaires have to consider that?
They do. In fact, remember the key, a big part, and Mr. Ferlin asked us yesterday, a big part of them getting to a revenue outside the Beltway was contingent upon this happening. Now, I would suspect a lot of them would like to have this part as the entire concession, and we have chosen a different path, which I think is in the best interest of the taxpayers.
So we're recommending that for your approval?
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other comments or discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, contract's awarded. I think that it brings us to the end of the formal action items. Is there any other business to come before the board?
Mr. Chairman, there are a couple other bid items
The threshold report for Charlie, he was just giving you that.
Okay.
To look at if you have a particular question.
No, I didn't know if we had to.
Yeah, it was threshold.
The requirement is that projects between 2 and 5 million that I bring back to notify the board of the awards.
I do have one, unless there's anything, one thing. I'd like, again, we spoke about this last night. I want to thank the board for their work over the last couple of years. I think we did take a historic vote. You've been part of something that's, I think, going to be, as time goes on, the citizens of the Commonwealth will understand much better the benefits, not just of the scores of the SMART scale, but what it brings to the efficiencies and the transparency and accountability in the Commonwealth. So I want to thank the board for their hard work. Got a lot more to do, but that I think is a big piece of work that's well done. I also want to thank those members. Our next meeting, there will be new appointment, at least one appointment. Mr. Matney will be rotating off, coming off of the Transportation Board. I wanted to publicly thank him for his efforts and all the work that he's done. We will have the new appointments of the governor at our next meeting. I don't know if, I'm not privy to the other changes, but Mr. Matney did not put his name in. He chose to do other things, and we want to thank him very much for his time with the board. So, yes, Mr. Williams.
Just to add a little bit to that, and I won't waste too much of the time for the board, but I had the privilege of serving with a former senator from that region, from Southwest Virginia, William Walker. And if anybody ever worked with him or served with him, you understand the passion that guy used to make sure that Southwest Virginia, which is west of Cleveland, and not a whole lot of people think about it, that they were fully represented, and when the Commonwealth's resources were used, he made sure they always got a share. I know John has served just like that, with the same sort of passion. And while the governor hasn't asked me for any advice whatsoever, I would advise him to find someone to hopefully replace John that has the same sort of passion and the same willingness to work with everybody to make sure that that region, because the region does tend to be forgotten.
Yeah. No.
Takes somebody with a lot of passion to represent it.
Well said. And I also point out that much of it Mr. Matney did. He had an at-large out there that got ill, unfortunately had ill, and a lot of that fell totally to him, and I think he did represent that area.
Thank you, Secretary. I wear my VDOT hat proudly.
Yeah, so that's great. When we're out there, we're still going to look you up. That's for sure, and that, because I think we'll take the motto: once a CTB member, always a CTB member, and we'll reach out. So
Or Secretary of Transportation.
Yeah. Well, here's one thing, guys. I want to make this point. A lot of the reforms that were taken really are going to follow this transportation board to make sure that they go forward. The governor and I will not be here in 18 months, but many of you will. So it wasn't taken lightly, given the fact the next time you come, you'll be picking a vice chair, and you will have the independence that has not been the case in the past. That was not taken just from the standpoint of it's the politically thing to do. It was with the intent in mind as we made these reforms that they actually were made for the future. And this board will be the ones that will fall to, and I would encourage that we don't go back, because I think you're onto something very good here that are good for Virginians, and these are tough decisions. I'll point out, you guys, it's a working board. I mean, if you're looking just to sign off your name to say I was on the board, this is not the board for you. Because over and above the 2 days a month, I know many of you spend lots of time in public hearings working with others, and so I think citizens of Virginia are well represented, and I think now you're set up to really represent that, and not that things weren't always done the right way, but at least more transparently and are in the public domain. And they're tough decisions. I mean, I'll point out, it's not been a matter of some of the things that have been built. I don't think the Commonwealth has really built anything it shouldn't have. On the other hand, compared to other needs, was it the appropriate thing to do? And I think that's what Smart Scale and all these reforms help us make that decision. So, yeah, Mr. President.
One more comment. Nice comments about the working board and people's dedication. And I just do want to say this is, and I can't speak for other parts of government, but VDOT and DRPT staff throughout this process have been phenomenal, responsive. I think we talked at one point, I've seen one negative comment in this whole process about the efforts of VDOT and DRPT. Everything else has been positive, responsive, dedicated staff, work past 5, responsive to localities of citizens. Have been really impressed by the effort, and led largely by Mr. Donahue, who's put a lot of time and effort into this, but really do also want to commend the staff. Just could not speak more highly of the dedication and commitment to the process and to really being responsive to the transportation needs of the Commonwealth.
I couldn't agree more. And that really starts with leadership, and it really starts from the governor down. The lead he has set, and allowing us to do these reforms and expecting that they be successful. We've had a lot of talks, about people tend to do what you expect of them, and given the right tools, they want to be successful. And I was talking with Delegate Chairman Jones, Appropriations, because he was saying, well, how do we keep this going? And these are some of the comments that I've talked about. It's really not some of the things we've institutionalized, but it's the leadership. It's, and this board will have a leadership role, and hopefully the leaders of the agencies will take from it and the Secretary and the Governor, this is what's expected and this is what's good for the citizens. And by the way, it's also a lot more rewarding than getting beat up all the time. I think everybody wants to perform and do the right thing. So, okay. Well, if there's nothing else, let's see, Carol. Next meeting will be here in July, and before I forget, we need to invite Hampton Roads PDC is going to come up and present. We're going to start doing as we go through House Bill 2 again, and with the places we don't travel to, we'll have come up and present to us, so we have an idea. They've asked to come up and go through that, so we'll have them. And we'll be here for 2 days, and we do not meet in August for people that are planning trips. Not that you take this as the number one consideration, but won't be here in August. But then, of course, September we're in Fredericksburg.
Yes.
And then I don't think we meet again till the
October Transportation Conference.
October Transportation Conference, which is in Northern Virginia. So
I won't be here in July.
Okay. All right, that's right.
I won't be here in July.
All right, so, well, we'll soldier on. I mean, but life goes on. But anyway, thanks, everybody. And with that, we'll stand adjourned. And I think you won the poll. I think you said between 10 and 10:30. So you were, Carol's still right on.
Hours now?